Hey everyone, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scotsy Business, and today we're going to be talking about content approvals and user approvals, just generally having some sort of moderation approval process on a social media platform, and how I believe this leads to censorship, or at least opens the door to it, and thus makes a platform less decentralized and naturally more centralized, and why I think this is a problem. I've covered something similar to this before, where I've talked about blockchain platforms. People assume that they, support free speech and freedom of speech, but that's not always the case. This is a little more niche, specifically talking about approvals and moderation, and I want to dive into how this can potentially be a problem by going through a few examples and sharing a few platforms that do have this versus legacy platforms that are all doing tons of different forms of censorship, but they're not necessarily doing the content and user approvals. So let's talk about it. But first, a quick word from my sponsor today. A big thank you and shout out to my sponsor, Cake Wallet, which is an open source, non-custodial Bitcoin and Monero wallet that also has a built-in exchange. It's available on iOS and Android. Okay, thanks again to my sponsor. So let's jump into a couple examples. So the first one I have here is Brighteon. Now, while this isn't a crypto platform, this is a free speech, alternative platform that I have been patronizing for quite some time. As you know, I use about 40 to 50 platforms actively, fairly regularly, logging in, uploading content, etc. And Brighteon is an example where they're all about free speech, and the whole thing is like, we support free speech. This is a haven for people who've been banned, all that stuff. But if you start to talk about finance, then there's problems with the platform. I mean, Brighteon has always had, like your content is reviewed as it's going through, but it's always gotten past, so I never really thought it was much of an issue. But my financial content, if I put it in the financial category, it typically gets rejected, or they pass it, but it's shadow banned. And I know this is the case because I could upload the same video in a different category and instantly at the same time, and one will get 5, 10, 20 views, even though that's not a lot, and the other will get exactly 0 almost every time. A great example of this is just recently, a few days ago, or last week rather, I uploaded one of my investing reports and it got 0 views. I usually end up just deleting these because you can only have a limited amount of uploads. This is a good example of an actual rejected video. It never had a reason why. So when I'd complained about this, they'd reached out and said, they have issues with spam and scams around finance, etc. So they end up just going and rejecting everything, it seems. And their reasoning was, this is supposed to be for free speech. You're allowed to talk about finance on other platforms, so don't waste the storage space of Brighteon. I thought that was really interesting because you're already limited via how many videos you can upload based on your viewership. So the assumption is that if you're bringing in enough views, you're allowed to upload, as much as you're bringing in, more or less. But it seems that that's not the case. It's really just like, this is supposed to be a haven for free speech and nothing else. So only the people who get banned are really allowed to freely speak here. And how do they determine that? Based on their moderation. So again, it leads you to biased decision making, and even though this isn't really like being censored because it's no problem anywhere else, if this is supposed to be my backup and I'm getting rejections on my backup video host, then it's really hard to rely on all these different things, especially when they have content approvals, because you don't know when they're going to start denying your posts, sometimes arbitrarily. Who knows? So that's one example of the pitfalls of having content approvals, even though it's supposed to be even like on a free speech platform, right? On a non-free speech platform with content approvals, you can imagine tons of content being suppressed. Another platform that has content approvals is Coast.tv or Cause.tv, Contentos. And interestingly enough, they also covered it up after I pointed it out and posted about it. So I had all these posts listed under my denied. It seemed as if around the time that I said I didn't like Theta and that Contentos had adopted the Theta model and was using it, that a bunch of my old content got denied and removed, even though it had already been passed and posted previously. And there's no evidence of this now, aside from, half of my videos missing. But I did post about it a long time ago, and I kept the actual the post so that I could refer back to it exactly like we're doing now, where I can prove to you that they in fact did deny a ton of content. And then when I posted this, they went and they deleted all that. They didn't undo it. They just deleted the evidence that they did it. So it's like, why have approvals if when you make a deny or rejection, that you have to cover up that you did it? The only assumption in my mind that you would ever have to cover it up is that you're either making mistakes or you don't want people to find out about the things what you're censoring, what your motivations are. But in either situation, that's bad. If you can make mistakes on a content approval platform, then people are going to get censored with false positives and just, people making mistakes, etc. And if they purposefully, censored all of these videos, me talking about the basics of library, bit refill, just general videos about crypto, it just seemed so arbitrary. Like maybe it was like before a certain date. I wasn't sure because all these dates were random over the course of a little over a year. So it was very hard for me to nail down exactly what was wrong. And I didn't really ever get any information back on this, sadly. Even though I've previously done an interview them and had some communications with them, I was not able to get an answer on this. But, this is just another example of what can happen on platforms that censor. I'm not sure if some of the other examples are still like viable platforms. One is Trybe, and it just redirected me to Loop. So I'm going to assume that Trybe is not working unless I just don't have the correct thing pulled up. But I'll just read off of my document here. So Trybe used to have content approvals. It's an ethos based decentralized application, but they had content approvals. I complained about this a lot, and the moderation and the moderators and the admins, etc., they responded to my many concerns, saying that this was only a temporary measure. This was just because they were starting out. It lasted two and a half years, I would say, and it seems like it's gone. I'll double check, but it's probably gone. I said a long time ago that it was never going to make it because there were so few people posting. And the people who were posting were pretty annoyed at the idea that you had to get all of your posts approved. And it could take up to 24 hours for it to actually get posted. So it was like, okay, well, I need to post this other places and cross promote and everything. I'm not going to wait for this. I'm just going to post everything else and not really, put any attention towards this platform. And that kept happening. More issues. And then, people just stopped using the platform, and it seems like it's gone now. But they thought it was just going to be fine because it was a temporary measure. A, I think it's never temporary. And B, if you start off with already having like some negative aspect and you promise you're eventually going to decentralize, it's hard for me to believe that you're going to start super centralized and then decentralized. The best projects that I've seen have started as decentralized as possible and then added a separate avenue of centralization for performance, etc., and like resource management and things like that. An example of that would be like libraries started out completely decentralized, and then they built out Odyssey as a centralized alternative to build out different features and things that needed to be done in a centralized way versus all the stuff that was being done in a decentralized way. That is a good example of what that looks like. A perfect example of full decentralization would be the Hive network. And just jumping back into a few more of the things that I wanted to cover, these obviously are not platforms that have content approvals, but we already know like all the legacy platforms are censoring content en masse. They're banning people, mass moderation, hiding dislikes, removing comments. It's rampant. But the one thing that most of these platforms do not have is user approvals and content approvals. So like you don't have to get approved to use the platform, and your individual content does not need to be reviewed before posting. Mind you, YouTube has like a retroactive blacklist where right after you post it, they'll start, going through all, they'll start generating subtitles, going through all the words, and then decide whether or not they're going to remove it or community strike you or whatever. I've been community striked falsely. It affected my channel for like easily 3 months, very negatively affecting it. And I was fully outright banned on Vimeo and Dailymotion. Now, these two mentions aren't really necessary for content approval. It's more so just to put in perspective where things might fall, because even though Brighteon has content approvals and Coast.tv has content approvals, I still would recommend those over Vimeo or Dailymotion, who just outright banned me years ago just for random content that isn't bad at all. YouTube is more shadow banning, censoring, all these kinds of things, but they're not going to stop your content 100% from going out. Some platforms do have user approvals. Now, I think user approvals are a unique situation that I wanted to caveat and cover, because a platform, for example, like PublishOX, will have to approve you to become an author, but they're advertising, their marketing. They never said this wasn't the case. They're not hiding anything. They're not claiming that it's this way and it's going to change in the future. They're just like, no, this is what it is. This isn't a secret. This is how we've set it up. We need to be as legitimate as possible, because they're giving away sponsored crypto to people who post and use the platform and tip, etc. So they have to be very, very cautious as to who they're giving crypto away to. A, because there's only so much. B, because it was donated, so it's other people's crypto. And C, the only way that they're going to keep getting donations is if they're doing this very, tactfully, and they're doing it very well. So that is an example of, they don't have content approvals because they're not going to go through and decide what I can and can't say, but they are deciding who can generally speak and not speak in terms of being an author. Now, everyone can go on, as far as I'm concerned, and earn via tipping, etc. But to be an author, you have to get approved. And another example of that is like Rockfin, another video host. PublishOX isn't a video host. I'm just saying another as like an alternative to Brighteon, for example. But Rockfin, you also have to be approved as a content creator. They don't have individual content approvals, but as a creator, you do have to get approved. Now, the difference there is I would look at Rockfin and they do have more of a like, we are an alternative, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they do technically say that they vet their creators and they do the approvals, but it feels less obvious that that's the case on Rockfin. Again, none of this is to knock Rockfin or PublishOX or even Brighteon or Trybe or Coast.tv or any of these platforms. I mean, I still use Coast.tv. I earn money. It's fantastic. They have disapproved posts in the past. I'm still making money. They've been approving the majority of posts now. So this isn't necessarily to say don't use these platforms. These will all get, appended into my eventual comprehensive review of all the platforms in existence to give you the best breakdown of what to use. But I'm still earning a decent amount of money from Coast.tv. And, censorship can be a problem. but I'm still going to post on platforms that I don't fully like if they're going to generate me money, right? Like, it's not like I'm doing it in a way that is inauthentic or, at the risk of my integrity. It's not like I'm losing anything by using a platform that might censor, aside from, potentially wasting some of my time. But because I can earn money from it, because I get a following from it, because I can tell them to follow me elsewhere and cross promote, all of that makes it worth your while. Some of these other platforms, maybe not so much, like Brighteon, maybe not so much. Trybe, definitely not. Vimeo, Dailymotion, obviously I can't use those. YouTube, even though I get suppressed a lot, I don't make much. It's still better to be getting $40, $50 a month and having the like the legitimacy of having a YouTube channel versus not. I think it makes sense to be on all these platforms. I just think it's important to understand how content approvals and user approvals affect your usage of a platform and affect rather your perspective of whether or not you want to use it. Because many people would say, well, if I could have some issue with censorship, if there's any possibility, I don't want to waste my time on this platform. Most people are only on a few platforms, so I want you to be aware of all the caveats so you don't waste your time. I'm on like 40 to 50 platforms, so it's natural that I'm going to end up wasting a good deal of time. But I'm doing that so you guys don't have to. That's kind of the whole point of all these videos. So more or less, that's everything. The whole idea of this is just that the ethos behind all these alternative platforms, blockchain platforms, etc., is generally freedom, free speech, privacy, anonymity, all these values. And when you've got things like content approvals and user approvals and ways that you're kind of centralizing more and more and more moderation, you get away from all these values. And then you've got maybe just a kind of hybrid with what we used to have with legacy platforms like Twitter and YouTube, etc. So my job is to find the best of the best and then let you guys know so that you don't have to waste any time on the sub good platforms, essentially. So that's pretty much everything for today. Let me know, was this helpful for you? What platforms are you using? Are there any platforms that have content approvals or user approvals that you're not a fan of and you'd like to also shout out and let me know in the comments? I'm always curious and I'd like to list those and have a good idea of all that kind of stuff. Or if there's any platforms that you're on and I'm not on, would definitely love to know about that in the comments below. Anyways, thank you so much for watching to the very end. And since you did, it would be awesome if you could comment hashtag #1ham in the comments below. And that way I know that you watched to the very end. Anyways, I'm Scott Cunningham, aka Scottsy Business, signing off. Cheers.